Not the silence at dinner, not the way she stopped reaching for my hand. What I'm about to tell you, I still can't explain how I lived through it. Stay with me until the end. I was 63 years old when my life came apart, retired. 2 bad knees, a decent pension from 30 years in construction management, and a marriage I thought was the one solid thing I'd built that would never need repair. My wife and I had been together for 31 years. 31. We raised 2 kids in a 4-bedroom house in Raleigh, North Carolina. We buried a dog together. We sat in the same hospital waiting room when my father had his stroke. I thought I knew every version of her, the young woman who laughed too loud at her own jokes, the mother who held our daughter through 3 a.m., fevers, the woman who still left coffee on my side of the counter every morning even after she knew I'd switched to decaf. I thought I knew her. Looking back now, I can see every sign I missed. The way she started dressing differently, nothing dramatic, just a little more carefully than before. New perfume I didn't recognize. Her phone face down on the kitchen counter when it used to just sit wherever she dropped it. She joined a book club in the spring. I thought nothing of it. She'd always been a reader. Tuesday nights, she'd come home a little later than I expected, but she was always in a good mood afterward, and I told myself that was a good thing. I told myself a lot of things. She started going to the gym on Saturday mornings. We'd always done yard work together on Saturdays. Small shift, I barely noticed. She started sleeping on her side of the bed like there was a wall between us. When I'd reach for her, she'd say she was tired, or her back hurt, or she'd already taken something to help her sleep. I was 63. I figured this was just what long marriages looked like after the kids were grown. I figured we were just tired people. I was wrong about all of it. The first real crack I couldn't explain away was in September. I came downstairs one morning and she was standing at the kitchen sink, just staring out the window at the backyard. Not doing anything, just standing there. I said good morning and she didn't answer for a few seconds, like she hadn't heard me or like she was deciding something. Then she turned around and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I asked if she was okay. She said, of course. She poured herself more coffee and walked out of the kitchen, and I stood there with the feeling that I'd just interrupted something private, something she hadn't meant for me to see. A week after that, she told me she needed space. We were at that same kitchen sink, ironically. She was rinsing dishes. I was reading something on my phone at the table. She just said it, without any build-up. I think I need some time to think. About us, about everything. I put my phone down. I asked her what she meant. She couldn't look at me directly. She said the marriage had felt hollow for a while and she needed to figure out what she wanted. She said she thought it would be better if I stayed somewhere else for a little while. A few days, maybe a week. I asked her if there was someone else. She said no. I should have pushed harder. I know that now. But I was 63 years old and my wife of 31 years was standing in our kitchen asking me to leave, and something in me just folded. Not with anger, with grief. I had retired to spend time with this woman. I had imagined us growing into old age together in that house, with the backyard and the coffee and the Saturday mornings. And now she was asking me to leave, like I was a guest who'd overstayed. I packed a bag that evening. I called my son, who lives about 40 minutes away in Cary. He said I could stay with him and my daughter-in-law as long as I needed. He didn't ask too many questions. He could tell from my voice that I wasn't ready for them yet. I drove over with a duffel bag and a sick feeling in my stomach that I told myself was just heartburn. That was a Wednesday. On Friday night, just after 1 a.m, my phone lit up on the nightstand in my son's guest room. I squinted at the screen. It was Marcus, my neighbor, from 2 houses down. We'd lived near each other for 12 years. He wasn't the type to call late, I answered. His voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Tight. He said my name and then said, "I don't know how to tell you this, man. There are police at your house. A lot of them. I'm standing on my front porch right now. There's an ambulance." I sat up in the dark and asked him what he meant. He said there'd been a commotion around 11. He'd heard what sounded like shouting, then a loud bang, and then nothing. He'd watched from his window for a while, unsure. By midnight, there were 2 patrol cars. By the time he called me, there were 3, plus the ambulance and yellow tape across my front door. I didn't say another word to him. I was already moving. My son heard me in the hallway. He came out in a t-shirt and asked what was happening. I told him I didn't know yet. Get in the car. Come with me. He didn't argue. He was still pulling on his shoes in the passenger seat as I backed out of the driveway. The 40-minute drive felt like 4 hours. My son kept calling his mother's phone. No answer. He called again. No answer. He tried to stay calm for my sake, I could tell, but his knee was bouncing against the dashboard the whole way, and neither of us said very much. What was there to say? My mind went to dark places, and I kept pulling it back. She's okay. She has to be okay. There's an explanation. I turned onto our street just before 2 a.m., and I saw it immediately, the lights, the cars, the tape, yellow crime scene tape across my own front door, like something from a television show. I pulled over because I couldn't drive any further. There was an officer standing near the mailbox, and he walked toward my car before I'd even fully stopped. I rolled down the window. He asked if I was the homeowner. I said yes. He asked for my ID. I gave it to him with shaking hands, and he looked at it and looked at me and said I needed to come with him. They took me to a separate car. Not in handcuffs, they were clear about that. They said I wasn't being detained, but they wanted to ask me some questions. My son started to follow, and another officer stopped him, politely but firmly. He stood on the sidewalk, and I watched him through the window of the patrol car, this 40-year-old man, and he looked like a kid. The 2 officers who sat with me were professional. They told me my wife was alive. I exhaled like I'd been holding that breath since Marcus called. They told me a man had been transported to the hospital. They told me the situation was under investigation. Then they started asking me questions. Where had I been that evening? What time? Was there anyone who could confirm that? I almost answered every single one of them. I came within maybe 30 seconds of sitting in that patrol car and talking freely, the way you do when you've done nothing wrong and you think openness will make everything go faster. Something stopped me. I think it was the way one of the officers had his notepad already open before I'd said a word. I thought about my son standing on the sidewalk. I thought clearly for the first time since my phone had rung. I told them I wanted to call my attorney before I answered anything further. I said it politely. They exchanged a look. They said, of course, that was my right. And the questions stopped. I didn't have an attorney, technically. I had a guy who'd done our estate planning who knew a criminal defense lawyer in Durham. I called him at 2:15 in the morning and left a voicemail. But the act of saying those words, I'd like to speak with my attorney, changed the energy in that car completely, and I've thought about that moment many times since. What I learned over the following hours, pieced together slowly over days and weeks, was this. His name was Derek. He was 51 years old, divorced, and he worked at the same fitness center where my wife had been going on Saturday mornings. They had met in the spring. The affair had been going on for about 6 months, but sometime in late August, my wife had tried to end it. Derek didn't accept that. He started showing up places he shouldn't have been. He drove past our house. He texted her at all hours. My wife, I would later understand, had been terrified for weeks before she sent me away. She hadn't sent me away because she wanted space from our marriage. She had sent me away because she was afraid of what Derek might do if he came to the house and found another man there. That Friday night, Derek had come to the house. My wife had not called the police beforehand, even though she had reason to. I've spent a long time thinking about why, and I think it comes down to the fact that she was ashamed. Calling the police meant explaining everything. Explaining everything meant telling me. And she wasn't ready to do that. Derek came to the house at around 11 p.m. He had a key she didn't know he'd made. He let himself in through the back door. What happened inside, I know mostly from the police report and from what my wife eventually told me herself, later, in pieces, during the worst conversations of my life. He came in angry. He wanted her to call me and tell me the marriage was over. He said if she wouldn't do it, he would. There was an argument that escalated quickly. He had been drinking. At some point, he put his hands on her. The medical report confirmed bruising on her arms and neck. My wife got free of him. She made it to the bedroom. There is a gun in a lockbox under our bed, a .38, registered in my name, which I had shown her how to use years ago and which she had never once touched since. She got to it before he got to the bedroom door. She fired once. She hit him in the shoulder. Derek survived. He was transported to WakeMed, treated, and was in police custody within 48 hours on charges including breaking and entering, assault, and criminal stalking. The district attorney ultimately decided not to charge my wife, ruling the shooting consistent with self-defense under North Carolina law. My wife was not arrested that night, but she sat in a police interview room for 4 hours while I sat in a patrol car outside my own house not knowing any of this. By the time they let me in through the front door, the ambulance was gone. One patrol car remained, and the sun was beginning to come up gray and cold over the neighbor's rooftop. She was sitting at the kitchen table. She had a blanket around her shoulders that someone had given her. She looked up when I walked in and I saw her face, really saw it. All of it. Every single thing she'd been carrying, and I didn't say anything. I just pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. I want to be honest about what the weeks after that were like, because I think the honest version matters more than any clean story. I was not gracious. There were nights I lay in that guest room at my son's house. I didn't move back home right away, staring at the ceiling with a rage so cold I didn't recognize myself. 31 years. I had given her 31 years of a good life, a stable life, a life where she wanted for nothing that I could provide, and she had brought another man into our house, into our home. She had been afraid of him, and she still hadn't told me. She had sent me away to protect herself and left me driving around, not knowing why my marriage was falling apart. I am 63 years old, and I sat in my son's guest bathroom and cried like I haven't cried since my father died. My son was patient with me in a way that I will never fully be able to repay. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't push me toward forgiveness or away from it. He'd come down in the mornings and just make breakfast, and we'd sit and sometimes talk and sometimes not. His wife was the same way, steady, quiet, present without being intrusive. My daughter called from Phoenix every couple of days. She was angrier than I was, honestly, and talking to her sometimes helped in a strange way just because she let herself be furious on my behalf without asking me to be. I saw my wife twice in those first 3 weeks. Once at the house to get more of my things. Once at a coffee shop, at her request, where she told me the full account, how it started, how it escalated, when she knew it was a mistake, when she became afraid. She didn't make excuses. I'll give her that. She sat across a laminate table at a Panera Bread and told me the truth, all of it, and her hands shook the entire time. I listened. I didn't yell. I asked a few questions. I drove home to my son's house and I didn't speak for the rest of the day. The legal process moved slowly the way legal processes do. Derek pleaded guilty to the assault charge and 2 counts of stalking to avoid trial. He received a suspended sentence and 3 years probation, which felt like a joke to me the first time I heard it. My attorney, the real one I'd hired by then, not the estate planning guy, explained the realities of the system to me and told me that what mattered most was that Derek had a criminal record now and a restraining order, and the conditions of his probation amounted to a significant restriction on his life. I nodded. I didn't feel better, but I nodded. I moved back into the house in December, about 10 weeks after that night. Not because everything was resolved. Because it was my house too, and because sleeping in my son's guest room was not a life. My wife and I lived in the same space, like 2 people sharing an office, polite, careful, wide around each other. We started seeing a counselor separately, then together. I want to be clear that I'm not standing here telling you it was easy, or that love just smoothed everything over. It didn't. Some mornings I'd come downstairs and see the back door and think about what happened in this house, and I'd have to put my hand on the counter for a minute before I could pour my coffee. There was one morning in February, maybe 4 months after everything, when I came down early and she was at the kitchen sink again, same position as that September morning that now felt like it was from someone else's life. She was looking out at the backyard. But this time, when I said good morning, she turned around immediately. She looked tired in the way that means you've been honest with yourself. She asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. She poured it and slid the mug to my side of the counter. And I thought, I don't know yet what this becomes. I genuinely don't know. But we're still here, and we're talking. And my son calls on Sundays and sometimes just wants to hear my voice, and my daughter is flying in next month for a visit. And the dog, we got another dog, chews things he's not supposed to, and knocks things over, and generally acts like the house belongs to him. Some nights I lie there and think about what Marcus told me later, after everything. He said that on that Friday night, right around the time Derek had come through the back door, he'd seen a second car pull slowly down our street and then turn around and leave. He thought nothing of it at the time. He mentioned it almost as an afterthought. Weeks later, over the fence. I think about that car sometimes. I don't know whose it was, but I know that if I had been home that night, if my wife hadn't sent me away, for whatever reason she had, I might have been the one who opened the back door when Derek knocked. I might have been the one in the hallway when a drunk and angry man who didn't want to lose something decided to take matters into his own hands. I don't say this to excuse anything. I say this because at 63, I've learned that life is not clean. It doesn't hand you a tidy story where the bad thing was only a bad thing. Sometimes the thing that hurt you most is also the thing that kept you breathing. I don't have advice. I'm not built that way. I'll just say this. If you're a man my age sitting in a house that feels quieter than it used to, don't do what I did for too long. Don't tell yourself that distance is just what long marriages look like. Don't accept a story just because it's easier than asking for the truth. And if you ever find yourself in a parking lot at 2 a.m., being asked questions you don't understand yet, say those 4 words. I want my attorney. Say them politely and say them clearly, and say them before you say anything else. I'm 63. I've built houses that are still standing. I've made mistakes that can't be unmade. I'm still learning what it means to look at a person you thought you knew completely and understand that you were seeing what you wanted to see, not what was there. One morning at a time. One cup of coffee. One honest conversation. That's the only thing I know how to do now, and some days it feels like enough.